Good afternoon. Hey, it's Patricia with Dragonfly Lights, and thank you for joining me today on Thursday's video chat. Today is the day I like to bring up topics that are pertinent to diabetes, but may not be the thing that most people are talking about, especially when it comes to your medical providers. So what I really like to do is talk about things that really impact your day-to-day living and not just things like your blood sugars and things like that. So I had the wonderful opportunity to visit with some folks yesterday. I attended a wellness fair at Arnold Transportation, and it was a really nice time, nice day. The weather turned out great, and I got to visit with a lot of their employees. And, I met a lot of really wonderful people, but unfortunately, a lot of people with diabetes. So I always hate meeting someone with diabetes because I get them, I connect with them, but I also hate that they have to struggle with this illness. So it's always a bittersweet moment. But I met some really wonderful people, and it's just a really good thing to connect with people who get you, who are in the club, if you will, and just understand what it's like to have that sort of thing in your life that you have to deal with every day. So some of the things that I really took away from them are, they're amazing people. They're working really hard, and they all work very hard. And we're going to talk about their jobs in a minute. But what I found is they are doing the best they can. These people just make it happen. And I think that's indicative of people across the country, across the world, right? We all do the best we can. But it got me to thinking that diabetes is really, really hard on its own. But it could be really, your job could make it a lot more difficult. And there's several factors that play in. So we're just going to level the playing field by it's hard no matter what. But just talking with some of the folks and people that I know and just experience with other jobs, I was just going to touch on a few that just, made me think about it. So I think the two kind of opposing factors that when it comes to diabetes would be a sedentary job where you're sitting down a lot. So activity is limited. You really have to interrupt your day to get up and do something. And so it's really a lot harder to do those active things that help you kind of keep your blood sugars more stable. And the opposite would be an active person. So I know for me, when I worked in the ER, I rarely sat down. And I was moving all day. And so in that aspect, you're having to manage your blood sugar for a higher burn rate, if you will, and for just being more active, right? So it's a different dynamic. I have friends, and when I personally went to the corporate world where you're sitting a lot more, and that presents its own challenges, right? So you are less active, you're a little bit more restricted by time because you are in meetings from A to B, right? So it's really hard to get up in a meeting and go do something. So you have to plan a little bit better. So when I was out at Arnold Transportation, a lot of their employees are truck drivers, right? So it brought this whole new set of challenges with them that they would have to deal with. So one would be you're sitting for long periods of time, pretty much all day. And two is lack of access to the restroom. So you're going to have to stop or make some sort of accommodations, which, if your blood sugar is running a little high, that can be a challenge. And then also your food choices. So you're either packing a lot of food to bring it with you, or you're stopping places and you're limited by what's available and what's convenient. So just a lot more planning involved, or a lot more unexpected blood sugars because you didn't have control of all the dynamics that you want to. I also think a lot of these folks, because they're isolated, I think they get to hear on the radio, which is great, and talking with folks on the phone, but I think they seem to have a lot more limited information because they're more isolated, they're by themselves. So I'm sure there are many jobs where you're working alone, right? You're by yourself, and you may not work with anybody else that has diabetes that really gets what you're going through and that can share tips. So those are some of the things that I just really, stood out in my mind. I thought it was interesting the way that people adapt and how they accommodated for the different work styles. So one of the gentlemen, I thought this was great. So he was a truck driver, but he kept a bicycle in the main warehouse building. So when he came in, he would ride the bicycle around. So he would get his exercise just riding around the parking lot just to kind of get the blood flowing and moving. And I thought, what a great idea. Other folks were talking about just taking walks, like I have a friend that she takes a walk a couple times a day that's really improved her blood sugars. And so she's getting out, and then other people have joined her. So it doesn't have to be working out at the gym for an hour and crazy sweating. If you're not doing anything, taking a short walk a couple times a day is great. Doing some jumping jacks a couple times a day. Anything that really gets your blood flowing is better than nothing. So I think that's a good way to look at it. So when I worked corporate America at MedHost, hi guys, they had this really cool thing they did a couple times a day, and it was for just a very short while, but they would do push-ups and planks. And so the whole team that sat at their desk most of the time writing code, several times a day, we would get down on our forearms and do push-ups and planks. And it only was maybe 5 minutes. But when you do 5 minutes a couple times a day, 5 days a week, that adds up. So it wasn't intrusive to the workday. It actually kind of gave everybody a break and got your blood flowing, which was good. And it chopped up the day, but you got the exercise in. So I think it's really figuring out how to be creative in little tiny bits. So ride a bike a little bit, take a lap around the building. If it's raining, you can walk the stairs. That's something, again, we used to do when I worked in the hospital, is we would walk the stairs at night on our breaks just to get some more exercise in. I think the other thing that's really hard, especially when you're working out, not out of the home, but you're like in a place where you have to bring your food. So it's planning ahead, especially these folks on the road. They kind of already knew where they could go, what they could eat, what their good foods were, what their bad foods. And so they had learned over time just what foods worked for them and which ones didn't. So I thought that was really great. And the other thing that was really nice was they created a community, and they were very supportive of each other. So they were able to share, trade tips, give each other advice, which really just created a really nice work dynamic. So that was all so positive, but it just really made me think about, wow, right, our work, which we have to do to pay the bills, we're rated on it, we're judged by how well we work, but it impacts our diabetes. And so what I found, and this is kind of categorically true, I think, in my experience, but those hardworking people, those farmers, those truck drivers, those police officers, firemen, there's a lot of people that just give it their all, and they're very selfless. And what I was hearing again from the folks yesterday, that some of these guys would work despite feeling bad because they needed to earn the income for their family, they had a job to fulfill. And so people would go beyond what is expected, do the job anyway, until they were so sick they couldn't do it anymore. So that made me stop and think, as well, as there's so many hardworking people that put themselves last. And so when you're dealing with diabetes, it's so hard to do, but you got to make the effort to put yourself first, so that you are taking care of yourself. You're, making sure that you're planning, stopping when you need to stop. Any job will take everything you have, and if you give them 10% more, they're obviously going to take it. So you have to be the one who's putting the boundaries on that. I think it's wonderful for people who are hard workers, love working with them, and I come from that same stock, but diabetes certainly changed that for me. And so I'm not saying don't work hard, but I am saying make sure you take a few moments to do what you need to do, check your blood sugar, take a break, get a little movement in on a small break, because you are important. And I think that's the thing, we give so much to others and we come last. And when you're last, there's not much left over sometimes. And so with diabetes, right, it's a long haul, it's a long game. And so just make sure that you're thinking about this, because you don't get a second chance. Today is all you have. So today, do something good for yourself, right? Take a break, figure out what you need to do, get a little exercise, go for a walk. It's beautiful weather right now. It's a great time to do it. I'm loving fall in Texas. So in the grand scheme of things, are 5 or 10 minutes a day too much, right? Is that too much to ask to give yourself that much? Because it's definitely going to impact your life and your success, and especially those people who depend upon you. So hats off to all the hard workers out there. I love you. I respect you. Much admiration. Just make sure you're taking care of yourself. I'd love to hear about your job too. So if your job has special nuances I didn't mention, leave them in the comments below, and maybe we'll talk about them next time, or somebody else may have the same issue. So signing off now. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll talk with you next week. Take care. Bye.